Hello again. Honda CBF 500. I want to explain something that's occurred to this bike in case you get the same problem with your CBF 500. So, the engine totally filled up with petrol. Totally filled up. It drained the tank and it all ended up going into the engine. So when I undid this, literally as I got to there, it poured out of there, gushed out under pressure. It was that full with petrol. So that's not good, is it? If your engine's full of petrol, that's not good. Apparently it's quite common with these bikes. This is a 2005 Honda CBF 500 and it does happen. I want to give you the knowledge that I've got at the moment to save you going through what I went through to fix it. I have fixed it, but it wasn't what I thought. So what do you think filled up the engine with petrol? You're going to think the float, the needle and the float has failed, and it's drained it straight in as it's been stored, and it's gone into the carburettor and then flooded the engine. So you're going to think, as I did, the needle has failed. So I took out the carburettors of this bike and I changed both of the float bowl, washers, gaskets, made sure the float bowls were okay, and they seemed to be working all right. I thought that one of the needles had stuck down. Now, it wasn't that at all. What had occurred, if you look around the other side, underneath here, just up there, that thing there, is a vacuum switch that when the engine's on, it sucks and it allows fuel into the carburettor. And what had made this engine fill up with fuel is that switch had failed. So if we go over to the bench here, in fact I've got it over here. This is part of one of those vacuum, and inside, this is the vacuum switch where under the fuel tank, there's a rubber gasket. This rubber gasket had gone hard and it had fouled while the bike was being stored. So all the fuel, probably about 6 or 7 litres of fuel, had drained past this into the carbs. The weight of that fuel had pushed down those needles and overwhelmed the float and flooded the engine. And apparently this is quite common with these bikes. These things foul. Once this fouls, your engine is going to flood with fuel if your engine is left. In fact, even if it's not left, it's still going to flood with fuel. So I bought a rebuild kit and I rebuilt this, which is over here now, totally rebuilt. Okay, so that there's rebuilt. Now, that's fine now, it's not going to foul. But for belt and braces on this CBF 500, I've fitted this. This is a secondary switch where I can isolate the fuel. So I can turn the fuel on and I can turn the fuel off. So when I leave this bike now, I can switch the fuel off. So if that valve fouls again, it is not going to flood my engine with petrol because we have an isolator valve here. I'm going to tidy this up. This is all going to get pulled in and cable tied. The other thing I'm going to put on is this. An inline fuel filter. That's going to go in here like that, just to give it a bit of extra filtering. And on the side of these, they're actually labelled carb with an arrow, so you know that's the way it goes. They go one or the other way. So we're going to put that on, and we're going to put that on, and we're going to tie it all in. And that there is literally belt and braces to isolate this tank should that fail. So the moral of the story is, I took all this out, all this carburettor. It took about an hour to get the carb out and probably another hour to get it in. And the first time I did it, I crimped the gasket, so I had to pull it all out again and do it again. It wasn't that at all. It was this that had failed. So all you have to do if your engine fills with fuel is, don't worry about taking the carburettor off. Don't worry about taking the carburettor off. All you've got to do is buy a rebuild kit for that vacuum switch, put a new oil filter on it, drain out from the drain plug underneath all the fuel, and believe me, it all came out. I had about 7 litres of fuel came out of this, and oil. And then once you've done it, replace the oil with fresh oil. And I'd recommend riding the bike for a little while and then doing a complete oil change yet again, because if you don't, obviously the oil's going to have been diluted from the fuel. So just give it a flush through is what I'm getting at. And now I'll put this in here, turn that on, check it's in neutral, which it is, and show you how it starts now. So I'm turning the fuel on, pull out the choke, we're in neutral. And off, so I've fixed it. That was a challenge, but I've done it. So should your bike fill up with petrol, don't bother taking all the carb out and checking the needle. It won't be that, it'll be that vacuum switch. They're a nightmare, and I'd recommend, if you've got a CBF 500, stick an external fuel shut off on it, because if it goes, it causes a lot of grief. This is the little on and off switch that I've plumbed into the original on and off switch, which is vacuum used. There's your on off switch straight into the carb, and I rerouted that underneath the carburetor straight in. That saves that'll save your engine from flooding. That's now off, so when it's stored, the bike's stored, that will be in the off position. I tried to fit an inline filter on this, it just would not have it. You put an inline filter on this, the engine will not start for some reason. I tried different filter, it just would not start, so I've took the inline filter out, just left it with an on and off switch. But inside here there's an inline filter anyway. On the fuel pickup there's an inline filter, so it's not critical. The main thing is you've got this switch to stop. If that fails, it stops your carb flooding out and then your engine flooding out with petrol. That was an absolute nightmare. I tried to find references to the engine filling up with fuel on the internet. I couldn't really find it. People have referred to it's happened, but no one really says why it happened. And that's the reason. It's because that damn fuel vacuum pump failed because the rubbers went hard. So that's it. Thanks for watching.